Welcome to today's edition of the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com. I am Kevin Rogers, and it's the final day of September. We've made it, and the NFL kicks off tonight, Week 4 in Cincinnati. It's the Jaguars and the Bengals, and we'll see if Jacksonville can finally break through the win column or if the Bengals can improve to 3-1. We'll talk about that. Plus the college game tonight, Virginia and Miami in the ACC, as Vince Akins will join us coming up in just a moment. But first, we want to welcome in our friends from BetMGM. And BetMGM sponsors the Daily Insider, and a lot of really cool things with BetMGM. As you see here, bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets for new players only. Must be 21 or over in the following states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C., and full terms and conditions apply. BetMGM, they are the king of sportsbooks. As we bring on now Vince Akins. He is the king of the trends, right? At least we'll call him that for now. And Vince is located in Ohio, so a big football game in the Buckeye State tonight. I mean, there's been bigger, but you have the Thursday night showdown, Jacksonville and Cincinnati, Vince. And I'll tell you this, I like the Jags tonight. I do. And a lot of people think I'm crazy. I posted the YouTube best bet video, and a lot of people thought I was nuts. But what are your thoughts on this matchup tonight between the Bengals and the Jags?
Sure. Well, anytime you can get the Bengals Jaguars on primetime, it's a big game. But, talking about the side there and the Bengals laying 7.5 points currently, I just want to point out just how rare that is for Cincinnati. The last time they were favored by at least 7 points in a game was back in November 2017, and that was against the winless Browns at that time. But Cincinnati actually hasn't been favored by more than 3 points in any game since 2018. So you're talking about 2 full seasons plus now, where Cincinnati hasn't been favored by more than 3 points in a single game. I think they've only been favored twice at all over those last 2 seasons. And now you're talking about a 7.5 point spread in this game. So that's something to keep in mind. Not a huge sample size for the Bengals when you're looking at them as favorites, and certainly not to this number in the last couple of years. What I did want to point out here is an interesting nugget on you have the total of 46 there. And the key number for the Bengals really has been totals above 45. Looking at their home games, we're dating back to the middle of October 2018. Their home games where the total has been at least 45 have gone 10-0-2 on the over, so 2 pushes there and 10 overs. And you compare that with games under 45 total in that stretch at home, 2-7-1 over under. So really that 45 often kind of a line of demarcation is sort of a medium number total. That started to creep up in recent years, but high total games have been over for the Bengals, and low total games have been under when they've played at home the last few seasons.
What are your thoughts on the Bengals in, I guess, the sense of a letdown spot? They don't win at Pittsburgh very often. Understandably, Ben is not what he was, but it's still a big win for a young Bengals team in this competitive AFC North. And Green Bay is on the horizon next week. That tough spot, though, and like you mentioned, you don't get the Bengals as this big of a favorite normally.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some letdown potential there. I actually tried to look at Bengals coming off wins as the Steelers, but there's really not enough sample size there to take anything too noteworthy from it. But yeah, I certainly could see a young team not used to being favored, short week, adding a little more variance to the game. Definitely some reasons to be cautious about laying that kind of number with the Bengals tonight.
What about on the flip side with Jacksonville? Everyone knows the struggles Urban Meyer has had so far. Trevor Lawrence has not been sharp. Jacksonville has lost every game by double digits, but also they played 2 3-0 teams the last 2 weeks, Denver and Arizona, and they've not been a road dog yet. So do you see any value there where people are totally dismissing this Jacksonville team because of the way they played the first 3 weeks?
Yeah, I've heard people joking about, maybe Urban will be better with a game where there is less preparation, just 3 days to prepare. And who knows about that? Jacksonville certainly is, not unfamiliar with being a big road dog, and that didn't go well too often last year. But this is a team. Yeah, you mentioned played two 3-0 teams. Has been competitive at times in their games, despite the final scores not showing. Week 1, not so much, but the last 2 weeks they've managed to hang around against Denver and Arizona, two teams that have probably been better than expected looking at this first month of the season.
Now let's look at college football tonight, Vince, and ACC battle in Miami. It's the Hurricanes and Virginia, and Miami already falling to Alabama and losing to an improved Michigan State team at home. And Virginia, they're a team that obviously is trying to move up in the ACC, but I feel like they've been stuck in the middle for a long time. And we'll see what De'Ara King, his health tonight. He should play for the Hurricanes after he didn't play against Central Connecticut State last week in that blowout. But what do you have tonight on the Hurricanes and the Cavaliers?
Sure. Going back to the totals here and pulling up a couple of nuggets, one on each side. We're looking at Miami coming off that game against Central Connecticut, and if you could name Central Connecticut's mascot, you're doing better than I am. But looking at them coming off a home game, obviously, as big favorites last week, they threw for 417 yards and ran for 332. So we look at games, just looking at more modest numbers. So they've thrown for at least 290 yards last game, ran for at least 125. So solid efforts, both running and passing the ball. Home game last week, they've gone under 10 straight times, dating back to November 2014 in that situation. On the other side, not such an impressive performance last week for Virginia. Big upset loss to Wake Forest. They allowed 37 points in that game, and certainly a disappointing effort for their defense. Dating back to October 2015, Virginia playing as dog as they are tonight, coming off a game where they allowed at least 34 points. The under has hit 16 of those 19 games. So you have Virginia as a dog looking to bear down from a poor defensive performance last week. That has trended towards the under the last several seasons for the Cavaliers.
Now let's go to Saturday. Got a lot of really good games in college football, Vince. And Cincinnati and Notre Dame. You don't normally see the Fighting Irish as a home underdog, but in this case, it's warranted. And Cincinnati, a very good team out of the American Athletic Conference. We'll see them in the Big 12 coming up in a few seasons. But Cincinnati, a very good quarterback with Desmond Ridder. And Notre Dame, look, it was an odd game last week against Wisconsin. That low-scoring game until the fourth quarter. Things kind of blew up there for Notre Dame. They got the win over the Badgers. And what do you have for the Bearcats and the Irish in South Bend?
Sure. Yeah. Looking at the first glance, and honestly probably second glance, this line stood out to me a bit. A bit surprised that Notre Dame's playing as the home dog in this game. We'll start on the Cincinnati side and talk about just how rare this is. We talked about the Bengals and their rare spots tonight. Looking at to Saturday and the Bearcats, the last time Cincinnati was a road favorite against any team ranked in the top 25 was 2009. So you're talking significantly far back. And looking at situations where they've been favored against a top 10 team, I think our database goes back to 2006 on that. And I do not believe there was a single occasion with Cincinnati favored against a top 10 team over that stretch. So really a unique situation for them to go on the road in a big spot as a favorite with expectations in this game. So you mentioned Notre Dame as the home underdog. That has happened 4 other times since 2014. In those games, Notre Dame is not only covered, they have won outright all 4 games playing as a home underdog the last 7 years there. The most recent being last year against Clemson, obviously the big night game there, the first of their meetings of the season. Notre Dame was the home dog in that game, winning outright in that shootout. They were also home underdogs a couple years ago to open the season against Michigan. It was a small line pulling off that outright upset. So with Notre Dame, not in this spot very often as a home dog, but have found success not just against the spread, but outright in these games.
Now, the big game on Saturday inside the SEC, we have 2 of them. You have Georgia and Arkansas is 1, but also Ole Miss and Alabama. And you have 2 of the top Heisman favorites in this game, Matt Corral with Ole Miss, Bryce Young with Alabama. This number I saw today, Vince, Nick Saban, 23-0 in his career against former assistants. And we know Lane Kiffin's not taking this one lightly at all. And Ole Miss hung with Alabama last year. over 1,000 yards in that crazy game that Bama won in Oxford. But this time around, the Crimson Tide, a 14.5-point favorite over the Rebels.
Yeah, and honestly, just to before I get into the couple of nuggets here, to pull the curtain back on this game a little bit, looking at, we look at hundreds of systems. I'm talking about some team stuff coming this game. We look at hundreds of systems, and looking at against the spread, honestly, Ole Miss has more systems active on them than any game, I think, other game this year. The problem with that is Alabama also ranks in the top 2 or 3 as far as how many things are active trending towards them in this game. So just something to think about if you see a stat, NCAA-wide stat backing one of these teams coming in this game. There are really a lot of things active in this game. So I decided to parse down to a couple of interesting nuggets here on the team side, looking at Alabama. So obviously, I think the first thing that stands out with this game more than the line is the total, 79.5. You don't see many college football games get to that number. Particularly talking with Alabama and the kind of pedigree they have. So I looked at games they've played with a total of at least 65. They've played 9 such games. All have happened since 2018 and beyond. In those games, Alabama has averaged 54.2 points per game. So when you see this kind of total with Alabama, a couple of those games obviously were expected to be blowouts, even much greater than this magnitude. But their offense really shows up in games with high totals. And all 8 of those games, 2 of those games were bowl games. All 8 of those games that were regular season games, they won each of those outright by at least 15 points. So now turning over to the spread here, obviously that's when you look at a normal team favored by you have 14.5. I've seen 14 in this game. That doesn't really bat an eye. For Alabama, that's actually a smaller number. So looking back to November 2017, games where they have not been favored by more than 14 points. They are just 1-7 against the spread in those games. We saw that this year with the Florida line coming in right at that number and Alabama winning but not covering. And that's been a trend now for a few seasons where when there's tight lines in Alabama games, and obviously this one's right at the medium number, which is tight for an Alabama game, they have been warranted.
Let's take a look now at the NFL, Vince, and you have the Ravens and the Broncos coming up on Sunday. And we had mentioned Denver earlier. 3-0 start. Understandably, the competition's not great, beating the Giants and beating the Jaguars and beating the Jets. But a team like the Denver Broncos, who has struggled to find the right quarterback for a long time, they get Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know if he's the right guy, but for now, he's not making mistakes, and he's getting Denver down the field and getting them wins. Now you're getting tested against the Baltimore team who's coming off that improbable win at Detroit last week. Broncos a slight favorite. What do you have with this one?
Sure. Well, the first one I'd pull up here just for you. Teams coming off a 65-yard plus game-winning field goal last week, 0-0 against the spread.
Good. Good. We'll see how that one turns out this week. Sample size very small.
Yeah, I didn't look up what the 1970 Saints did after Tom Dempsey's winning field goal, but knowing the Saints in the 70s, I'm guessing that was probably a loss as well. But as far as some more actionable information here, this is one we mentioned a couple weeks ago when the Ravens played the Chiefs, and you could have found that in it was ended up being the side of the month selection in that game as well. The Ravens now 11-0 against the spread since November 2017 as a regular season underdog. So we've seen that come through once already this year. An interesting nugget in that game, or in those games, is the Ravens as an underdog, regular season underdog, those 11 games. They've run the ball an average of 34.4 times per game for 170.6 yards in those games. While their opponents had averaged 19.4 carries per game for 70.4 rushing yards. So in these games as underdogs, the Ravens have run for over 100 yards per game more than their opponent. So you think about what Ravens want to do in these tough situations where they're underdogs. They really turn to the run and trying to control the ball on the ground and have done so success, both limiting their opponent's rushing attacks and leaning on their own, which is no surprise for the Ravens. Looking at another interesting stat. So last week, I believe the Ravens ran the ball just 22 times against the Lions in that near upset. That's obviously extremely low total. I believe the second lowest in the last 3 seasons for Baltimore. So one look at games where they ran the ball no more than 30 times last game. Looking back the last 2 seasons, Baltimore 6-1 outright coming off of those games. But the interesting nugget is in these follow-up games. The last game they didn't run the ball as often as the Ravens would like to. They've run the ball an average of 36 times in these games for 197 yards per game on the ground. So if you're thinking about both how the side, the total line up in this game, as well as maybe even some player props, consider the Ravens very likely to try to pound the ball on the ground here in Denver this week. So I mentioned the total there, and we can flash up the stat of the week graphic if you'd like, as we look to the Broncos now. Kind of amazing how long this trend has been going. Denver has gone under their last 21 straight games, coming off a game where they were favored. That's already hit twice this year, and this is going to be the third straight week this stat is active. So you think about Denver, this stat spans the Vic Fangio era, and even before that, games, they're coming off a game where they're favored. The idea being they're used to being favored, kind of getting into ball control situations, playing things safer as a favorite. Going to this next game, that carries over with an amazing 21 straight games there, going under the total. One other interesting nugget, looking at their defense last week, I believe they gave 162 total yards against the Jets. New York offense really didn't get anything going in that game. So looking back to November 2017, games where they allowed less than 275 total yards last game. So strong defensive efforts, looking at total yardage. Those games are 0-11-1, hitting the under over that time frame.
It's pretty impressive. 21 consecutive games on the under for the Broncos after they were favored. I want to ask you this before we move on to the next game. When we see lines like that where it could flip, Denver's laying one right now, and then who knows by game time if it's flipped where Baltimore is favored, how do you approach it when you have the numbers like Baltimore 11-0 ATS, last 11 as a regular season dog? How do you approach it if, let's say, you lock in Baltimore and then Baltimore closes as the favorite? I mean, how do you classify that if they don't end up closing as the underdog?
Sure. Well, the lines that get used in the SQL database we use generally are considered consensus lines based on the week. So what they're going to look at is, say this flips at Sunday at noon to Baltimore by 1. That's generally still going to lock in as Baltimore being the underdog, having been in that case this all week. As far as I say is about using something like that, I would say two things. One, you can also look at a different range of numbers and pull up something different. Say you wanted to pull up Baltimore in games where the line's within 3 points of pick or something, where if you want to give yourself a little bit more of a range, we can pull up, find that statistic as well. The other thing I would say is, that's a good reason why to not use just one trend, one system when handicapping your games on the week is one of those things. If you like Baltimore, that's a good nugget, but their regular season underdog performance shouldn't be the sole reason for selecting a game, because if that does flip to Baltimore by 1 by game time, if you have 5 other factors in addition to that why you like that game, then I think you could still feel comfortable taking the Ravens to that spot. But if that was a lone factor, and then you talk about these kind of close lines that may flip, that's probably not a strong reason to play the game in and of itself.
All right, let's take a look now at the Sunday Nighter and the Buccaneers and the Patriots. Tom Brady going back to New England. We know the storyline. And, I don't know if Brady, if they were looking ahead last week. And look, I'm not going to take anything away from the Rams. They're an excellent team, and they could be in the Super Bowl this year. But just a bad spot for the Bucs. Now they're going to New England, and Belichick, Brady, there's a book coming out. It seemed like it wasn't a great finish for the two of them, but Tom obviously right now doing better than Bill because he's off a Super Bowl, and Bill doesn't have a quarterback really. He's got a young guy in Mac Jones. But with Tampa Bay, what did you find? And with New England, as far as this spot, the Patriots lost to the Saints last week as a favorite. Now they're a dog, and the Bucs nearly a touchdown favorite here, Vince.
Sure. We talk about some rare situations. Again, we see this line here, 6.5, seen 7 a couple of places. New England's only been a home dog of at least 7 points twice since going back to Tom Brady's first season to start in 2001. The other time was last year. They were 7.5-point home dogs on Monday night against Buffalo, lost that game 38-9. So kind of trying to pull up a couple of team trends for this game. And this one's hard. We've talked about it here in the past. I know how much do you value the quarterback? How much do you value the coach? And looking at team trends, obviously this is a unique situation where if you're looking at New England's numbers long-term or Tom Brady's numbers long-term, it's going to have both of these guys in it. So a particularly unique situation. I think, a lot of times you're looking at New England's numbers. I feel comfortable looking at them still because Belichick has been there so long. He has a system in place. This is sort of a unique situation facing his old quarterback this week. So I tried to pull up a couple of just recent smaller team trends looking at this game. First, I want to look at the Patriots, how they did last season without Tom Brady as an underdog. And honestly, you could have stretched most of Tom Brady's time there. If you want to look at them being an underdog of at least 4 points, that almost all occurred last season compared to the last 10 years or so. But last season, the Patriots just 1-4 against the spread as an underdog of at least 4 points. So when they had those big lines last year, like this week, it was warranted, and they couldn't pull off the same magic as years past. Looking at the other side, just looking at last season with the Buccaneers, coming off a loss last year, the Buccaneers lost 5 times going through the playoffs. They were 5-0 against the spread in the follow-up games, coming off a loss last season. Each one of those times they bounced back. One of those was a tight loss as a dog as well, where they covered another 4 pretty sizable wins in this situation.
Yeah, and the good news too is, Vince, that you would think, again, 5-0 against the spread when coming off a loss. And, we like to go to sometimes we overthink things. I felt like it was like that with Dallas on Monday night against Philadelphia that, and I'm not going to speak for you, but at least for myself, that, you overthought the Eagles a little bit, overthought the Cowboys. Now they're back at home and they just dominated the Eagles, where that's what it kind of feels like with Tampa Bay on Sunday night, that New England has failed to really move the ball offensively. Mac Jones will be good someday, but just right now he's not there. And Brady's got all the weapons around him. They lost to a really good team last week. I just can't really make a case for New England. I don't know what your feeling is, but I just can't make a case for them in this game.
Yeah, and the spread could be a different thing, but just thinking about the kind of team that you need, I think, right now to beat Tampa Bay and some of the teams that beat them a couple times in the second half last year, where they lost to the Chiefs, just losing to the Rams. I really think you need to be in a game where you score a lot of points if you're going to beat the Buccaneers. It's hard to envision a scenario in which Tampa Bay scores 10 points, 14 points, even 17 points in this kind of game. So when you think about the kind of team that could upset the Buccaneers, it's hard to really see New England's offense being in that situation right now. I mean, maybe Belichick and McDaniels have been saving some special stuff for this week with it marked on the calendar, and we're going to see some interesting trick plays and some different schemes and something that New England's offense is going to look different than it has the first 3 weeks. But just knowing Tampa Bay's strength against the run and where New England's offense strength lies right now, it's hard to see a case where New England can really match Tampa Bay in a shootout in this game.
The other thing I just thought of, Vince, kind of out of nowhere, and I wanted to make sure, last year, and again, take away the Super Bowl, I feel like they had struggles in those night games. When you go back, they lost to Chicago on the Thursday night, the famous Brady didn't know what down it was. They got blown out by the Saints on a Sunday night at home. They lost to the Rams on a Monday night at home. That, just going back through it, they struggled with the Giants on the Monday night, that they had some issues in the night games. That could be kind of, I'm not saying the only reason you always say you need a couple reasons, but I feel like that's one that I remembered, that they had problems in those night games last year.
Yeah. And I remember that as well. I remember people joking about Tom Brady's age and night games, and who knows, maybe there's something to that in his dedicated sleep schedule. But yeah, generally speaking, you don't see it too often. I know one exception is Kirk Cousins in primetime games. But you don't see teams have prolonged struggles in primetime games over the long term, really. Not that there can't be exceptions to that, but usually things that hold up in overall games hold up in night games. And, maybe there's an exception of Tom Brady's age. We will see Sunday. Yeah,
we'll see if Brady puts it to Bill Belichick. We'll see if that really stands true. So you could check out Vince Akins and his work. Great job with the trends and also just the deep data dive, as we like to call it. And you can find Vince's college football picks, NFL picks, baseball picks in season right now at VegasInsider.com. Vince, we appreciate the time. Best of luck, and we'll talk to you next week.
Appreciate it as always, Kevin. Take care.
All right, there is Vince Akins, and again, a lot of good information from him. The Bronco trend was pretty strong. 21 consecutive unders after they were favored. And we'll see how that line goes on Sunday against Baltimore, if that turns out to be a pick 'em or Baltimore closes as a favorite there. But again, on this level, I don't want to take away, like the Broncos, they are a team that is trying to you have all three of them in the AFC West behind the Chiefs, trying to take the division crown away from Kansas City. And the Chiefs so far have shown they're a little bit vulnerable. They're 1-2, still a long way to go in the season. But the Raiders have played well. The Chargers have played well. Those teams play Monday night in LA. And then the Broncos have a big test against the Ravens. Kansas City goes to Philadelphia, which you would think is a winnable game. They're 7-point road favorites. But there are these teams that, especially Denver, if the schedule's going to get tougher, obviously, but those games you can't lose to the Jets, you can't lose to the Giants, you can't lose to Jacksonville, and Denver passed all those tests already, so that's good. But now, regardless of the result on Sunday, no one can say if Denver loses to Baltimore, well, they're a sham and they beat bad teams. I mean, we'll give them a break. I mean, Baltimore's still a pretty good team with a guy that was an MVP a few years ago, Lamar Jackson. But also on the flip side, I mean, Baltimore should have lost the game to Detroit after seeing that final drive where the Lions had them dead to rights. Biggest mistake I think the Lions made, you can't do anything about Justin Tucker's field goal. I mean, that's just ridiculous, him kicking a 66-yarder off the crossbar. But they sack Lamar Jackson on first down, incomplete pass on second down. Lamar gets chased out of bounds on third down. Fourth down, for whatever reason, I don't know why Dan Campbell changed around his defense a little bit. I know I'm playing the result here because Lamar completed about a 25-yard pass, but Lamar, you had him shaken up the first three plays. Why you backed off because you're afraid he's going to run for 20 yards. You should have just kept pressuring him and seeing what happened. But then he completes a pass towards midfield. Ravens get another completion. They kick a long field goal. And Baltimore, I mean, shoot, they could be 0-3 at this point, the way things are going. Honestly, I would say 1-2 because they should have beat the Raiders. They should have lost to the Chiefs and should have lost to the Lions. But now they're 2-1 because they came back against Kansas City, came back against Detroit, and blew the game against Las Vegas. And Detroit's just a mess anyway. But that the Broncos, look, they'll be tested. But, again, they're very good defensively, and we'll see if Teddy Bridgewater pick up another win. Let's take a look at a few baseball games before we exit. And I want to look at this, Yankees and Blue Jays. So last night, Toronto, they jumped out to a 4-0 lead on the Yankees. New York came back and tied the game at 5, which I thought was pretty interesting considering Garrett Cole did not pitch well for the Yankees last night. But somehow the Yankees came back, and then Bo Bichette hit the go-ahead home run in the 8th inning for Toronto, and they won 6-5. So Toronto, this race is going to be unbelievable towards the end of the season. Yankees leading the Red Sox by 1 game for home field in the wild card game. Red Sox are in the 2nd spot. Seattle, who they took 12 in a row from Oakland, which is like Oakland, just look in the mirror or just look at the Mariners. You couldn't beat them at all. That's why you're out. So Seattle is off today. They're a half game back of Boston. Red Sox play the Orioles later. They beat the Orioles last night. Toronto's 1 back. Now, here's the finish for these teams. Yankees get the Rays at home. Now, Tampa Bay doesn't really have much to play for. Red Sox get the Nationals and interleague play in D.C. Okay, that's not difficult, but also it's not easy. Seattle plays the Angels at home. And then Toronto plays Baltimore. So the Blue Jays have the easiest schedule of the 4. Now, remember, you have 4 teams, 2 of them get in. Major League Baseball definitely wants Yankees Red Sox. They don't want Mariners Blue Jays in that wild card game. But the way things can go, who knows? But Toronto Yankees tonight, somebody's going to win that game. So if, let's just say, the Yankees lose and Boston wins, the Red Sox will tie the Yankees for the top spot in the wild card, and the Blue Jays will move to 89 and 70, one game back, because New York would be 90 and 69 if they lose tonight. Look, it's going to be a great finish to the season. So Robbie Ray goes for the Blue Jays tonight. He's trying to not only help Toronto get in the playoffs, but also win the Cy Young. 13-6, 2.68 ERA. And he's coming off a win his last time out against Minnesota. And look, he draws the Yankees, which is not an easy task, considering the Yankees were on fire before Toronto beat them last night. And in 2 starts against New York, Ray is 0-2. Gave up 5 runs last time he faced him, but that was back in May. So let's be fair on that one. Corey Kluber, who had a no-hitter earlier this season for New York, and he hasn't been great since he returned off the injured list. He faced Toronto. That was his last start before he went on the injured list. Gave up 2 earned runs in 3 innings of a 6-2 loss back in late May. But the Yankees have won his last 3 starts. He's given up 7 earned runs in that span. He's faced 3 non-playoff teams, the Mets, Indians, and Rangers. Now let's take a look at the one game from the National League East, the Phillies and the Braves from Atlanta. And the Braves, they actually, look, they've been outstanding this year. And the one thing I dug up on Atlanta, which is really interesting, they have not pulled off a home sweep this entire season. They have not swept anybody at home. And the Braves go for the sweep of the Phillies tonight. So Philadelphia, they're basically done, right? They are right now 4.5 back of Atlanta with 4 days left in the season. Now, Philadelphia has played 158 games. Atlanta has played 157 games. So Atlanta, they get the Mets this weekend. The Phillies play the Marlins. The Phillies they need to win tonight to stay alive. They lose tonight and they're done. But all the guns have gone for Atlanta in this series as far as on the mound. Charlie Morton won game 1. He picked up a victory. Max Fried went last night, picked up a victory. It's Ian Anderson's turn tonight. And Ian Anderson has actually faced the Phillies several times this season. And it's been some mixed results. In fact, the Braves not won back-to-back starts made by Anderson since early May. But what's interesting is Anderson pitches better, or he's pitched better in Philadelphia this year compared to Atlanta as far as when the Phillies and Braves play each other. In the 2 starts in Atlanta, he's allowed 7 earned runs in 11 1/3 innings of work. In the 2 games in Philadelphia, he's pitched 12 innings and given up 1 earned run. So pitched better at Citizens Bank than at Truist Park. Kyle Gibson goes for Philadelphia tonight, and Gibson hasn't been great since he was acquired from the Rangers. It's a decent pitcher, but Philadelphia's already lost with Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler so far in the series, so it can't be any worse with Kyle Gibson, right? Gibson's allowed at least 3 earned runs in 5 straight starts. He has not faced Atlanta since getting traded to the Phillies. But look, Philadelphia's season's on the line here. I mean, it's still going to be heavy odds for them to win the National League East. But let's see what they can do here as they face the Braves for the final time coming up this season. So you have a lot of other baseball games tonight, but want to focus on those. I mean, there's some other ones that really don't have a lot of playoff implications, so there's no reason really to break those down. Let's tell you again about our friends at BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. If you are a new player, you can bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. That's for new players only. And BetMGM, legal in the following states: New Jersey, Colorado, West Virginia, Tennessee, also Pennsylvania, Indiana, Michigan, Virginia, Iowa, DC, Arizona, and Wyoming. So you could check that out. Full terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older to play. And that's from our friends at BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. Bet on any NFL money line. And if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets for new players only at BetMGM. I am Kevin Rogers. We appreciate you watching. Our thanks to Vince Akins as well for joining us, as he does every Thursday, to break down NFL and college football from a trend perspective. Brian Edwards will join us tomorrow. We'll talk some college football. Also, we'll talk some NFL as well, looking ahead to the weekend. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. And don't forget, if you missed any of today's edition of the Daily Insider, you can find it on VegasInsider.com or on our YouTube channel, as well as our best bets for Thursday night football between Jacksonville and Cincinnati. We'll talk to you again on Friday. And as always, best of luck with your bets.